For 75 years, I carried a secret so heavy it bent my spine and hollowed out my heart. I was 12 years old when my Uncle Raymond stole something from me that I could never get back. My innocence, my voice, my ability to trust. I told myself I would take it to my grave. I told myself that speaking it out loud would kill me faster than the silence ever could. But here I am, 87 years old, sitting in this wheelchair in a place that smells like disinfectant and overcooked vegetables, and I've realized something. The silence has been killing me all along. My name is Dorothy Mae Johnson, and this is the story I should have told 75 years ago. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this, and if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse and childhood trauma. Now let me tell you what really happened. The nightmares started again 3 months ago. I thought I had buried them so deep that nothing could dig them up. For decades, I managed to keep that night locked away in a corner of my mind where I never had to look at it. I raised 3 children. I worked 32 years in the cafeteria at Lincoln Elementary School. I buried a husband I loved with my whole heart. I became a grandmother 7 times over. I lived a life. But lately sleep had become my enemy. I would close my eyes in my small room at Meadowbrook Assisted Living, and the dreams would come. I would be 12 years old again, wearing that yellow sundress with the white flowers my mama had sewn for me. I would smell the honeysuckle that grew wild along my grandmother's back fence. I would hear the adults laughing on the front porch while the children played in the yard as the sun went down. And then I would see him, Uncle Raymond. I would wake up gasping, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might give out right there in that narrow bed. Some nights, I hoped it would. After 75 years of carrying this weight, wouldn't that be a mercy? Miss Dorothy, you all right in there? That was LaShonda, one of the night nurses. Sweet girl, maybe 25 years old. She would peek her head in around 2 or 3 in the morning, having heard me cry out in my sleep. I'm fine, baby, I would tell her, like I'd been telling everyone I was fine my whole life. Just a bad dream. Nothing to worry about. But it was everything to worry about. Because the dreams were getting worse, more vivid, more insistent. It was like that night from 1950 was demanding to be remembered, demanding to be spoken, demanding to be real again after I'd spent a lifetime pretending it never happened. It was a Tuesday evening in late September when everything changed. I was sitting in my wheelchair by the window of my room, watching the sun set over the parking lot. Not much of a view, but it was better than staring at these 4 walls. I had my Bible open in my lap, though I hadn't read a word in 20 minutes. My mind was somewhere else. Somewhere I didn't want to be. I heard a soft knock on my door. Grandma Dorothy. My heart lifted despite itself. That was Sarah's voice. My youngest granddaughter. 28 years old, smart as a whip with her mother's kind eyes and her father's determination. She was a social worker. Spent her days helping people who'd been hurt in ways most folks didn't want to think about. Come in, sweetheart, I called out, closing the Bible and trying to arrange my face into something that looked peaceful. Sarah came in carrying a small bag from the bakery on 5th Street. I brought you those lemon cookies you like, she said, pulling up the visitor's chair close to my wheelchair. The ones with the powdered sugar. You're going to make me fat, I said, but I was already reaching for the bag. Some pleasures you don't refuse, even at 87. Sarah laughed. Grandma, you weigh about as much as a bird. I think you can handle a couple of cookies. We sat there for a while, eating cookies and talking about small things. Sarah's job, her boyfriend Marcus, the weather, normal grandmother-granddaughter conversation, but I could tell something was on her mind. She had that look. The one that said she was working up to saying something important. Finally, she set down her cookie and looked at me with those serious eyes. Grandma, can I tell you about something that happened at work today? Of course, baby, Sarah took a breath. I had a client today. An elderly woman, about your age. She came in because she finally wanted to report something that happened to her when she was a child. Abuse, sexual abuse, by a family member. My hand froze halfway to my mouth with a cookie. My throat went tight. Sarah didn't seem to notice. She kept talking. It happened 70 years ago, Grandma. 70 years she kept it inside. And today, she couldn't carry it anymore. She said it was eating her alive from the inside out. I set the cookie down carefully on the napkin in my lap. My hands were shaking. What did you tell her? I managed to ask. Sarah leaned forward, her voice gentle. I told her that it was never too late to speak the truth. That even if the person who hurt her is long gone, even if there can't be any legal justice, speaking it out loud still matters. I told her that secrets like that are like poison. They might not kill you fast, but they kill you slow. Something broke inside me then, something I'd been holding together with wire and prayer for 75 years. A sound came out of my throat, not quite a sob, not quite a gasp. Grandma, Sarah's face filled with concern. She reached for my hand. What's wrong? Are you in pain? I was in pain. God, I was in so much pain. But not the kind Lashonda or any of the nurses here could fix with pills and ice packs. The tears started falling before I could stop them. They ran down my wrinkled cheeks and dripped onto my Bible, making dark spots on the worn leather cover. Grandma, please tell me what's wrong, Sarah said, her voice urgent now. She was kneeling beside my wheelchair, holding both my hands. I looked at her through my tears. This beautiful girl. This strong, compassionate woman who spent her days helping people find their voices. And I thought, maybe God sent her to me for this exact moment. Maybe after 75 years it was finally time. I was just 12 years old, I whispered. Sarah went very still. Her eyes never left my face. It was my Uncle Raymond. I continued, the words coming now like water through a broken dam. The summer of 1950, at my grandmother's house. Sarah's grip on my hands tightened. Oh, Grandma, she breathed. I never told anyone, I said, and now I was crying harder. Not really, not the truth of it. I tried to tell my mama, but she didn't want to hear it. She told me I was confused, that Uncle Raymond would never do such a thing, that I needed to stop telling stories. So I stopped, I said. I stopped talking about it. I buried it so deep I almost believed it never happened. Almost. Sarah had tears running down her own face now. Grandma, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. We sat there together as the last light faded from the window. And for the first time in 75 years I wasn't alone with my secret anymore. Do you want to tell me what happened? Sarah asked gently. You don't have to. But if you do, I'm here. I'm listening. And I believe you. I looked at this precious girl, and I thought about that woman she'd told me about. The one who finally spoke her truth after 70 years. If she could do it, maybe I could too. Yes, I said, my voice stronger than it had been in months. Yes, I want to tell you. I need to tell you. I need someone to know the truth before I leave this world. Sarah nodded, settling into her chair, still holding my hand. I'm here, Grandma. Take all the time you need. And so, as the room grew dark around us, I began to tell the story I'd kept silent for 75 years. The story that started on a summer evening in 1950, when I was just a girl in a yellow sundress and the world as I knew it came to an end. The summer of 1950 was hot and thick with humidity. The kind of heat that made your clothes stick to your skin and turn the air into something you had to push through just to move. I was 12 years old that June, gangly and awkward, all elbows and knees, with 2 braids my mama plaited fresh every Sunday night. We lived in a small town in Mississippi, the kind of place where everybody knew everybody, and your business was everyone's business whether you liked it or not. My daddy worked at the lumber mill. My mama took in washing and ironing for the white families on the other side of town. We didn't have much, but we had enough. We had each other, and we had family. Family meant everything back then. Every summer, the whole extended family would gather at my grandmother's house for what we called the summer social. It wasn't anything fancy, just kinfolk coming together to eat too much food, tell stories, and let the children run wild in the yard until the fireflies came out. My grandmother's house sat on 2 acres at the end of a red dirt road. It was a simple wooden house, painted white, with a wide front porch and a backyard that seemed to go on forever to a child's eyes. There were pecan trees for climbing, a vegetable garden my grandmother tended with fierce devotion, and that honeysuckle fence I mentioned, wild and sweet, smelling, especially in the evenings. Uncle Raymond was my mother's oldest brother. He was 42 years old that summer, a tall man with broad shoulders and a smile that showed all his teeth. Everyone liked Uncle Raymond. He told jokes that made the men slap their knees, and he always had peppermint candies in his pocket for the children. He'd been in the war, World War II, and came back with stories that made him seem like a hero. My mama adored him, her big brother, her protector growing up. She talked about him like he hung the moon. I liked him too. At first, he was nice to me. He'd ruffle my hair and call me Little Dot, because Dorothy was too long, he said. He'd let me win at checkers sometimes, normal uncle things. That particular summer gathering was in late July. School had been out for a month, and I was deep in that lazy, endless feeling that summer brings when you're young. No worries beyond what game to play next or whether there'd be watermelon after supper. We arrived at grandmother's house around noon on a Saturday. The yard was already full of people. Aunts, uncles, cousins of all ages. The women were in the kitchen, cooking and talking. The men were on the front porch or under the big oak tree, discussing crops and politics and baseball. The children were everywhere, shouting and laughing. I remember what I wore that day because I'd been so proud of it. My mama had made me a new dress. Yellow cotton with tiny white flowers printed on it. It had a white collar and buttons down the front. I felt so grown up in that dress, almost like a young lady instead of a girl. Don't you look pretty? Uncle Raymond said when he saw me. He was standing by the porch steps, smoking a cigarette, like a little ray of sunshine. I smiled at him, pleased with the compliment. Mama made it, I told him. Well, your mama did a fine job, he said. You're growing up, little Dot. Won't be long before the boys come calling. I didn't know what to say to that, so I just giggled and ran off to find my cousins. The day passed the way those summer gatherings always did. We ate fried chicken and potato salad and green beans cooked with fatback. We had fresh cornbread and sliced tomatoes from the garden. For dessert, there was peach cobbler and sweet tea so sugary it made your teeth hurt. After we ate, the adults sat around talking, their voices slow and drowsy in the heat. Some of the men dozed in chairs. The women cleaned up the kitchen, their laughter drifting out through the open windows. We children were turned loose to entertain ourselves. I played with my cousins for hours. We played hide and seek among the pecan trees. We picked blackberries from the bushes at the edge of the property, staining our fingers purple. We caught fireflies as the sun started to sink low in the sky. As evening came on, my grandmother called out that there was fresh lemonade on the back porch. Most of the children went running for it, but I hung back. I'd scratched my leg on a blackberry bush, and I wanted to find my mama to see if she had a handkerchief to wipe away the blood. I went into the house through the back door. The kitchen was empty now. The women had moved to the front porch to catch the evening breeze. I could hear their voices floating through the house, mixed with the deeper rumble of the men's conversation. Mama, I called out, walking through the kitchen toward the front of the house. In here, little Dot. That was Uncle Raymond's voice, coming from the small bedroom off the hallway. It had been my grandfather's room before he passed, and now my grandmother used it for storage and for guests who needed to lie down. I walked to the doorway. Uncle Raymond was sitting on the edge of the bed, looking at me with that smile of his. Your mama went to get something from the car, he said. She'll be back in a minute. What happened to your leg there? Blackberry bush, I said, showing him the scratch. It wasn't bad, just a thin line of blood on my shin. Come here, let me see, he said. I walked into the room. I didn't think anything of it. He was my uncle. Family. Safe. He looked at my leg, made a sympathetic sound. That looks like it stings, he said. You know what? I think there's some bandages in that dresser over there. Why don't you close that door so we don't get interrupted, and I'll fix you right up. I should have known. Some part of me deep down must have known. But I was 12 years old, and he was my uncle, and I'd been raised to obey adults without question. I closed the door. What happened next happened fast, but also somehow in slow motion. Like my mind couldn't keep up with what my body was experiencing. Like reality split in two, and I was both there in that room and somehow floating above it, watching it happen to someone else. He pulled me close, saying something about how pretty I was, how grown up I was getting. His hands were on me in ways they shouldn't be. On parts of me that no one had ever touched. I froze. I literally could not move. My voice disappeared like someone had reached down my throat and stolen it. This is our secret, he whispered. Don't you want to be special to your Uncle Raymond? This is what people do when they care about each other. I didn't understand what was happening. Not really. Not completely. I was 12 years old in 1950 in a small Mississippi town where nobody talked about such things. We didn't have words for it. We didn't have education about it. All I knew was that something was terribly, horribly wrong, but I didn't know how to name it or stop it. When it was over, and it felt like both seconds and hours, he straightened up and looked at me with a smile that didn't reach his eyes anymore. No, you can't tell anybody about this, little Dot, he said, his voice casual, like we'd just shared a joke. This is between you and me. If you tell, nobody will believe you anyway. They'll think you're a bad girl, making up stories. You don't want people thinking you're bad, do you? I shook my head. I still couldn't speak. I felt like I was going to be sick. That's my good girl, he said, patting my head like I was a dog. Now go on and wash your face. You don't want your mama seeing you cry and asking questions. I stumbled out of that room on legs that didn't feel like mine anymore. I went to the bathroom and locked the door. I looked at myself in the mirror above the sink, and I didn't recognize the girl staring back at me. She looked the same braids, same yellow dress, same brown eyes, but everything was different. Everything was broken. I washed my face like he told me to. I used cold water, trying to scrub away the feeling of his hands. But no amount of water could make me clean. I knew that even then, even at 12 years old. Some stains don't wash off. When I came out of the bathroom, the party was still going on like nothing had happened. The adults were still talking and laughing on the porch. The children were still catching fireflies in the yard. The world kept turning like it always did, but my world had stopped. I found my mama on the front porch, fanning herself and talking with my Aunt Clara. There you are, she said when she saw me. You all right, baby? You look pale. This was my chance. This was the moment I could have told her, should have told her. Mama, I started my voice small. Mama, Uncle Raymond. What about Raymond? she asked, only half paying attention, still fanning herself. He touched me. In the back bedroom. My mama's face changed. Her eyes went hard. She grabbed my arm and pulled me away from the other women, into a corner of the porch where no one could hear. What did you say? She hissed. Uncle Raymond touched me. I said again, tears starting to fall. He made me close the door and he touched me and… Stop it, she said, her voice sharp as a slap. Stop that right now. I don't know what you think happened, but you're confused. Raymond would never do such a thing. He's your uncle. He's family. But Mama, no, she said firmly. You must have misunderstood something. Maybe he was just checking that scratch on your leg. You're at that age where girls start imagining things, getting ideas. But you cannot go around saying things like that about your uncle. Do you understand me? You could ruin his reputation. You could tear this family apart. I stared at her, and something inside me shattered completely. She didn't believe me. My own mama didn't believe me. I'm not lying, I whispered. I'm not saying you're lying, she said, softening her voice slightly. I'm saying you're confused. These things happen to young girls sometimes. They get mixed up about things. But we don't talk about such matters, Dorothy May. We especially don't make accusations against good men like your uncle. Now go wash your face again and come back out here acting right, and we will never speak of this again. And we didn't. We never spoke of it again. Sarah hadn't moved from her chair beside me. In the darkness of my room, I could just barely make out her face, see the tears glistening on her cheeks. She was still holding my hand, and I was grateful for it. That warm, living connection to the present, to reality, to someone who believed me. Grandma, she said softly, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry your mother didn't protect you. I'm so sorry she didn't believe you. I nodded, wiping at my own tears with my free hand. I understand it better now than I did then, I said. Back in 1950 in our community, family reputation was everything. A black family in Mississippi, we already had so little power, so little respect from the world. We held onto each other, protected each other. Or at least, that's what we were supposed to do. But protecting an abuser isn't protecting the family, Sarah said, her voice firm. No, I agreed. No, it isn't. But that's not how people saw it back then, and my mama. She loved her brother. She'd looked up to him her whole life. I think hearing what I was trying to tell her would have destroyed something in her. So she chose not to hear it. She chose him over you, Sarah said quietly. The truth of it hung in the air between us. Yes. My mother had chosen her brother over her daughter. She'd chosen his reputation over my reality. She'd chosen comfort over truth. What happened after that day? Sarah asked. Did you have to see him again? I closed my eyes, remembering. Oh yes, many times. Family gatherings didn't stop just because I'd been hurt. If anything, my mama watched me more carefully after that. Not to protect me, but to make sure I didn't say anything to embarrass the family. Uncle Raymond acted like nothing had happened. He was still the jovial uncle, still handing out peppermints, still telling jokes. But whenever he looked at me, I saw something in his eyes. Satisfaction, maybe. Or ownership, like he knew he'd gotten away with it, and there wasn't a thing I could do about it. I opened my eyes and looked at Sarah. Do you know what that does to a child? To have something terrible happen to you, and then have to pretend it never did. To have to sit at the same dinner table with the person who hurt you, pass them the mashed potatoes, smile when they smile at you. It must have been unbearable, Sarah said. It was, I said. And it got worse before it got better. Because 3 weeks after that first time, at another family gathering, he did it again. Sarah's intake of breath was sharp. Oh, Grandma. The second time I tried to avoid him, I really did. But he cornered me in the barn at my Aunt Jessie's farm. Told me if I made a fuss, he'd tell everyone I was the one who'd come on to him. That I was a fast girl, a bad girl. That I'd seduced my own uncle. I laughed bitterly at the memory. I was 12 years old. I didn't even know what seduced meant, but I knew enough to be terrified of being blamed, of being seen as dirty or wrong or sinful. So I stayed quiet. Again. It happened 4 more times that summer. 4 more times before school started again in September and the family gatherings became less frequent. Each time, I died a little more inside. Each time, I became smaller and quieter and more invisible. I paused, gathering my strength to continue. This next part was almost harder to talk about than the abuse itself. By the time fall came, I'd stopped being a child. I don't mean I grew up, I mean I disappeared. The girl I'd been before that July day was just gone. I stopped playing with the other children. I stopped laughing. I couldn't eat much. Food would get stuck in my throat. I had nightmares every single night. My mama noticed, of course. She asked me what was wrong. I told her my stomach hurt, that I was tired, that I didn't feel good. She took me to Dr. Patterson in town. He couldn't find anything physically wrong with me, so he told my mama it was probably just growing pains. That girls my age got moody and difficult sometimes. Nobody thought to connect it to what I'd tried to tell my mama that first time. Or maybe they didn't want to think about it. Either way, I learned to wear a mask. To pretend I was fine when I was dying inside. Sarah squeezed my hand. How did you survive it, Grandma? How did you keep going? I thought about that question. It was one I'd asked myself many times over the decades. I don't know if I did survive it really, I said slowly. Not the way I was supposed to. I think a big part of me got locked away that summer and never came back. But the rest of me just kept moving forward because that's what you did. You didn't have therapy back then. You didn't have counselors or support groups. You didn't have words like trauma or PTSD. You just got up every morning and did what needed to be done. I went to school. I helped my mama with chores. I went to church every Sunday and sang hymns like I believed the words. And inside, I was screaming all the time. But nobody could hear it except me. The abuse stopped after that summer, I continued. Or at least, Uncle Raymond never got me alone again. I made sure of that. I developed what I now know people call hypervigilance. I always knew where he was at family gatherings. I made sure I was never in a room with him alone. I stayed close to groups of people. I became an expert at being invisible while also never being isolated. But the damage was done. The way I saw the world had changed forever. The way I saw myself had changed forever. I shifted in my wheelchair, my old bones aching. Sarah reached for the light switch, casting a soft glow over the room. I could see her face clearly now, so young, so earnest, so full of compassion. Grandma, she said carefully, did he ever abuse any other children in the family? The question I'd tortured myself with for 75 years. I don't know, I said, and my voice broke. God help me, I don't know. I've wondered about it every single day of my life. I've looked at my cousins, my siblings' children, wondering if any of them were carrying the same secret I was. But I never asked, I never said anything. I was too afraid, too ashamed, too convinced that no one would believe me anyway. And now most of them are gone. Uncle Raymond died in 1978, a heart attack. People talked about what a good man he was at his funeral. What a hero. What a devoted family man. I sat in that church and listened to them praise him, and I wanted to stand up and scream the truth. But I didn't. I sat there silent, just like I'd been silent for 28 years by then. My mama passed in 1989. She never brought up what I'd tried to tell her that day on the porch. Not once in 39 years. Sometimes I wonder if she even remembered, or if she'd convinced herself so thoroughly that it never happened that she actually believed her own story. Sarah was crying openly now. You deserved so much better, Grandma. You deserved to be believed. You deserved to be protected. You deserved justice. Maybe, I said, but deserving something and getting it are two different things. Especially for a black girl in 1950s Mississippi. Especially when the person who hurt you is family. I took a shaky breath. Do you want to know the worst part? The part that's haunted me more than anything else? Sarah nodded. I blamed myself. For decades I blamed myself. I thought if I hadn't worn that yellow dress, if I hadn't gone into that room, if I hadn't closed that door, if I'd fought harder, screamed louder, been stronger, maybe it wouldn't have happened. Maybe I could have stopped it. It took me until I was in my 50s, watching a talk show about childhood abuse, to understand that it was never my fault. Never. I was a child, he was an adult. He was family. He held all the power, and I had none. But by then, I'd spent 40 years carrying guilt and shame that should never have been mine. The room was quiet except for our breathing and the distant sound of someone's television down the hall. After that summer, I said, continuing my story, I became obsessed with being good. With being perfect. I thought if I could just be good enough, pure enough, worthy enough, maybe I could erase what had happened. Maybe I could prove I wasn't the dirty, bad girl Uncle Raymond had made me feel like. I threw myself into school and church. I made straight A's. I never missed a Sunday service. I joined the youth choir. I volunteered to help with the younger children's Sunday school class. I became the model daughter, the perfect student, the ideal young Christian girl. And inside I was empty, hollow. Going through all the motions of being alive without actually living. Sarah listened, her social worker training evident in the way she stayed present, didn't interrupt. Let me tell my story at my own pace. When I turned 16, I said, boys started showing interest in me, but I couldn't stand to be touched. Even a boy holding my hand at the movies would make my skin crawl. I'd make excuses. I was too busy with school. My mama needed me at home. I wasn't allowed to date yet. The truth was, Uncle Raymond had broken something in me. He'd taught me that touch meant violation, that male attention meant danger, that my body wasn't my own. It took me years to unlearn those lessons. I'm not sure I ever completely did. I met my husband James when I was 19 years old, I said, and despite everything, I felt a small smile cross my face at the memory. He was 22, just back from Korea, working at the lumber mill with my daddy. He was kind, patient, gentle in a way that felt safe. We courted for 2 years before we got married. Proper courting the old-fashioned way, supervised visits, church socials, family dinners. James never pushed me, never demanded more than I was ready to give. I think that's why I was able to say yes when he asked me to marry him. But even then, even with a good man who loved me, I couldn't escape what Uncle Raymond had done to me. Sarah leaned forward slightly. What do you mean? I took a breath. This part was hard to talk about even now. Our wedding night was difficult. James was confused. He'd expected a normal young bride, maybe nervous but willing. Instead, he got a woman who flinched at his touch, who couldn't stop crying, who curled up in a ball and trembled. I'd never told him about Uncle Raymond. How could I? Nice girls didn't talk about such things, and I was so afraid he'd see me as damaged, used, unworthy of being his wife. But James. My voice softened. James was an extraordinary man. He didn't get angry. He didn't demand explanations. He just held me while I cried, kept his distance when I needed it, and told me we had all the time in the world. It took me 6 months before I could be intimate with my own husband. 6 months of patience and kindness from a man who deserved so much better than a broken bride. But he never complained. He never made me feel like there was something wrong with me. Did you ever tell him? Sarah asked gently. About Uncle Raymond? I nodded slowly. Eventually. About 3 years into our marriage, we'd had our first baby by then, your Uncle Robert. One night, I just couldn't hold it in anymore. The secret was like poison, eating away at me from the inside. I told him everything. How did he react? He cried, I said, remembering the shock of seeing tears on my strong husband's face. He held me and he cried, and he said he was sorry. Sorry he hadn't known. Sorry he couldn't protect me. Sorry that such evil had been done to me. And then he asked me if I wanted him to confront Uncle Raymond. To report him to the police. To tell my family the truth. I closed my eyes. I said no. I was terrified of what would happen if the truth came out. My mama would never forgive me. The family would split apart. People would talk. And in 1956 in Mississippi, what could the police really do? It was my word against his, and it had happened 6 years earlier. I was his niece. No one would believe me. So James respected my wishes. He never spoke to Uncle Raymond again if he could help it. At family gatherings, James would stay by my side like a guard dog, making sure I was never alone, never vulnerable. He became my protector in a way no one else had ever been. But even with James's love and support, I struggled. I had 3 babies in 6 years. Robert, then your mama Linda, then Thomas. I loved my children fiercely. Being a mother gave me purpose, gave me a reason to keep going. But I was also terrified every single day. Sarah tilted her head. Terrified of what? Of Uncle Raymond, I said. Of him being around my children. Especially Linda, my baby girl. Every time there was a family gathering, every time Uncle Raymond was in the same room as my children, I watched him like a hawk. I never let them out of my sight. I never let them be alone with him, not for a second. James understood. He helped me watch them. Between the two of us, we made sure our babies were always safe. But it was exhausting. Always being on guard. Always carrying that secret and that vigilance. Did he ever try anything with your children? Sarah asked, and I could hear the anger in her voice. Not that I know of, I said. But I'll never know for sure, will I? Just like I'll never know if he hurt other children in the family. That's one of the cruelest parts of keeping silent. You don't just carry your own pain. You carry the terrible wondering about who else might have been hurt. I shifted in my wheelchair, my back aching. Sarah noticed and adjusted the pillow behind me without being asked. Such a good girl. The years passed, I continued. I worked in the school cafeteria to help make ends meet. It was good, honest work, and I loved feeding the children. Made sure every single one of them got enough to eat, even the ones whose families couldn't always afford the lunch money. Those children never knew I'd slip extra food onto their trays. My own children grew up. Robert became a mechanic. Your mama Linda became a nurse. Thomas went into the army, like his father. They all turned out good, despite having a mother who was broken in ways they couldn't understand. They knew something was wrong with me, of course. Children always know. They saw how I'd have nightmares and wake up screaming. How I couldn't stand to watch certain things on television. Anything that showed violence toward women or children. How I'd get quiet and withdrawn sometimes, lost in memories I couldn't escape. Linda asked me once, when she was 16, why I always got so tense around Uncle Raymond. Why I never let her or her brothers visit him and Aunt Pearl at their house, even though other cousins did. What did you tell her? Sarah asked. I lied. I said, shame coloring my voice. I told her Uncle Raymond had a bad temper sometimes and I just didn't trust it. It was easier than telling her the truth. Easier than passing my pain on to my daughter. Or so I thought. But secrets have a way of seeping out, even when you try to keep them locked up tight. Your mama grew up sensing something was wrong, even if she didn't know what. It made her anxious, watchful. She became a nurse, I think, because she wanted to help people to heal them. Maybe she was trying to heal the hurt she sensed in me but couldn't name. I paused, collecting my thoughts. The memories were coming faster now, 75 years of suppressed truth demanding to be spoken. Uncle Raymond died when I was 53 years old, I said. 1978. I remember the phone call, my sister Mary calling to tell me he'd had a massive heart attack while working in his garden. Dead before the ambulance arrived. I hung up the phone and I felt nothing, no sadness, no relief, just nothing. James found me standing in the kitchen staring at the wall. He knew immediately what had happened just from looking at my face. He's gone? James asked, and I nodded. James hugged me then and I finally felt something. Rage, pure white, hot rage that this man who had stolen my childhood, my innocence, my sense of safety. This man got to live 57 years, got to have a wife and children, got to be respected in the community, got to die peacefully in his garden and have people mourn him as a good man. I didn't go to the funeral, I said. I told my family I was sick, which wasn't entirely a lie. The thought of sitting in that church, listening to people praise him, looking at his face in that casket, I couldn't do it. I just couldn't. My mama was hurt that I didn't come. She called me, told me it was disrespectful, that whatever silly grudge I'd been holding all these years should be let go now that Raymond was dead. She still didn't understand, still didn't want to understand, and I still didn't tell her. Even then, I protected her from the truth, protected him even in death. Protected the family's image of who Uncle Raymond had been. I kept that secret locked away, just like I had for 28 years. Sarah wiped her eyes. Grandma, you were still protecting everyone but yourself. I know that now, I said. But at the time, it felt like the only choice I had. The pattern was set so deep: stay quiet, don't make waves, keep the peace. Even after he was gone, even after the direct threat was over, I couldn't break that pattern. James passed away in 2003, I said, my voice dropping. Stroke. Quick and painless, the doctors said, though I'm not sure I believe that. He was 76 years old, and we'd been married 52 years. He was the love of my life, the one person who knew my whole truth and loved me anyway. After he died, the nightmares got worse. Much worse. Without James beside me, without his solid presence to remind me I was safe, the past came flooding back with a vengeance. I started having panic attacks. My children thought it was grief, and it was. But it was also all the trauma I'd been holding back for 5 decades. Finally breaking through now that my protector was gone. Your mama, Linda, she was wonderful. She checked on me every day, made sure I was eating, made sure I wasn't alone too much. But even she didn't know the real reason I was falling apart. I looked at Sarah, this beautiful granddaughter who'd opened the door for me to finally speak. And then 3 years ago I had to move into this place. Meadowbrook Assisted Living. I couldn't manage on my own anymore. My body was giving out, arthritis, high blood pressure, weak heart, the works. And that's when the dreams really started. Being here, being vulnerable again, being dependent on others, it brought everything back. I'd close my eyes and be 12 years old again, helpless and afraid. Until tonight, I said softly. Until you came here and told me about that woman who finally spoke her truth after 70 years. Until you gave me permission to do the same. Sarah stood up from her chair and stretched, her joints popping softly in the quiet room. Grandma, do you need anything? Water? A break? I shook my head. No, baby, I need to keep going. Now that I've started, I need to finish. I've carried this for 75 years, I need to let it out. She sat back down, settling in. Then I'm here for as long as you need. I looked at her. This young woman with her whole life ahead of her, spending her Tuesday evening listening to an old woman's pain. You're a gift, Sarah. Do you know that? She smiled a small, sad smile. You're the gift, Grandma. Your strength, your survival, it's extraordinary. I don't feel strong, I said. I feel like I've been weak my whole life. Weak for not fighting back, weak for not speaking up, weak for letting him win. He didn't win? Sarah said firmly. You're still here, you survived, you built a life, raised children, loved and were loved. That's not weakness, Grandma. That's the strongest thing in the world. I wanted to believe her. After 75 years, I wanted so badly to believe that I hadn't been weak. There's more I need to tell you, I said, about the cost of keeping this secret, about what it did to me over all these years. Sarah nodded. I'm listening. After James died and I moved in here, I started having what the doctors called episodes. I'd be sitting in the common room or eating lunch, and suddenly I'd be somewhere else. Back in that bedroom at my grandmother's house. Back in that barn. I could smell the honeysuckle, feel the heat of that Mississippi summer, hear Uncle Raymond's voice. Flashbacks, Sarah said quietly. Is that what they're called? I asked. I didn't know there was a word for it. I just knew I was losing time, losing myself. The nurses would find me crying or staring into space, and they'd think it was dementia. They started talking about moving me to the memory care unit. But it wasn't dementia. It was trauma. All that trauma I'd been pushing down for 7 decades, finally refusing to stay buried. I twisted my hands in my lap, the arthritis making my fingers ache. There were times, many times, when I wanted to die. When I thought about taking all my pills at once, or just refusing to eat until my body gave up. It would have been easier than continuing to carry this weight. But something always stopped me. Maybe it was fear of hell. Maybe it was not wanting to hurt my children. Maybe it was just stubbornness, not wanting to give Uncle Raymond the satisfaction of destroying me completely, even from beyond the grave. Grandma, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. I'm so glad you didn't. I'm so glad you're still here. Some days I'm glad too, I said honestly. Other days I'm not so sure. But either way, here I am, 87 years old and finally telling the truth. I took a breath, steadying myself for what I needed to say next. There's something else, I said. Something I've never told anyone. Not even James. Sarah waited, patient and present. After Uncle Raymond died, I started doing research. This was before the internet. I had to go to the library, look through old newspapers and records. I wanted to know more about him. Needed to understand what kind of monster could do what he did to his own niece. What did you find? I found that he'd been investigated once back in 1947, 3 years before he hurt me. A neighbor girl, 10 years old, told her parents that Uncle Raymond had touched her inappropriately. But no charges were ever filed. The families worked it out privately, which meant they hushed it up to avoid scandal. Sarah's face went pale. So he had a history. Yes, I said, the word like poison in my mouth. Yes, he did. And if someone had believed that little girl, if someone had reported him, if he'd faced consequences, maybe he never would have had the chance to hurt me. Maybe I could have been spared. But instead, everyone stayed quiet. Everyone protected the family name, the reputation, the peace, and I paid the price for their silence. Did you ever try to find that girl? Sarah asked. The one from 1947. I shook my head. I thought about it, but by the time I found out it was the 1980s. More than 30 years had passed. I didn't even know her name. The newspaper article just said minor. I had no way to find her, no way to reach out, no way to say I believe you. I'm sorry, it happened to me too. Another regret to add to my collection. The room felt heavy with all the words I'd spoken, all the truth I'd finally released. Outside my window, I could see the parking lot lights casting long shadows. It was fully dark now. We'd been talking for hours. After I learned about that other girl, I continued. I became consumed with guilt. Not just about my own silence, but about hers too. 2 girls at least, that we knew about. And I started wondering, how many others? How many girls and boys did Uncle Raymond hurt over his 57 years? How many of them are out there right now, carrying their own secrets, thinking they're alone? That's when the nightmares got really bad. I'd dream about all these faceless children, all hurt by him, all silent like me. I'd wake up screaming their names. Names I'd made up because I didn't know their real ones. The nurses started giving me sleeping pills, then anxiety medication, then antidepressants. They were treating the symptoms without knowing the disease. How could they? I'd never told them what was really wrong. Sarah reached out and took both my hands in hers. Grandma, you know it's not your fault, right? What happened to those other children? If there were other children, that's not on you. You were a victim too. You were a child yourself. I know that in my head, I said. But my heart doesn't always believe it. For 75 years I've been asking myself, what if I'd been braver? What if I'd spoken up louder? What if I'd made people listen? Could I have saved someone else? You were 12 years old, Sarah said firmly. You tried to tell your mother and she shut you down. You did what you could. The failure wasn't yours. It was the adults who should have protected you. I wanted to believe her. God, how I wanted to believe her. There's one more thing, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. The hardest thing. Sarah squeezed my hands gently, encouraging me to continue. About 10 years ago, your mama, Linda, told me something. We were having lunch at her house, just the 2 of us. She'd had some wine with her meal, was a little more relaxed than usual, and she said something that made my blood run cold. I paused, gathering the courage to continue. She said, Mama, do you remember how you never wanted us around Uncle Raymond? I used to think you were being overprotective. But I'm grateful now. I heard some stories after he died, rumors about him and young girls. I'm glad you kept us away from that. Sarah's eyes widened. She knew. Not about me, I said quickly. She didn't know about me specifically. But she'd heard rumors, gossip, something. And in that moment I realized that people knew. Maybe not the details, maybe not the full truth, but somewhere, somehow, people knew that Uncle Raymond was dangerous to children. And they did nothing. They whispered about it at family gatherings. They kept their own children away. They spread quiet warnings. But nobody ever confronted him. Nobody ever reported him. Nobody ever stopped him. The whole family was complicit, I said bitterly. Not just my mama who didn't believe me. Not just the neighbor family who didn't press charges in 1947. But everyone who ever suspected, ever heard rumors, ever had a bad feeling, and chose silence over protection. I wanted to tell Linda right then and there. I wanted to say, it wasn't just rumors. It was real, it happened to me, but I couldn't. After 55 years of silence, I still couldn't break it. So I just nodded and said something like, yes, it's good to be careful. And Linda finished her wine and changed the subject, and we never talked about Uncle Raymond again. I looked at Sarah through my tears. Do you see now? Do you see why I've been having nightmares? Why the guilt has been eating me alive? I had a chance, multiple chances, to tell the truth, to warn people, to speak up. And every single time, I chose silence. And now I'm 87 years old, and Uncle Raymond has been dead for 47 years, and my mama has been dead for 36 years, and most of the people who knew him are gone. And I'm sitting here wondering if my silence cost other children their innocence, their safety, their lives. Sarah was crying openly now, but her voice was steady when she spoke. Grandma, listen to me. Really listen. You are not responsible for Uncle Raymond's actions. You are not responsible for your family's failure to protect children. You were a victim of a crime and a victim of a system, both familial and societal, that silenced survivors and protected abusers. The guilt you're carrying isn't yours to carry. It belongs to Uncle Raymond. It belongs to the adults who didn't believe you. It belongs to a culture that valued reputation over truth, silence over justice. You did nothing wrong. You survived. That's all you could do. That's all any child in your position could have done. I let her words wash over me, wanting desperately to believe them. Wanting to finally, after 75 years, let go of the guilt that had become as much a part of me as my own bones. I'm telling you now, I said, my voice stronger. I'm breaking the silence now. Maybe it's too late for justice. Maybe it's too late to save anyone else. But it's not too late for truth. It's not too late for me to say this happened. I was hurt. And it was wrong. Sarah and I sat in silence for a few moments, both of us emotionally exhausted. The weight of 75 years of secrets hung in the air between us, but somehow it felt lighter now that it had been spoken aloud. Finally, Sarah stood up and walked to the small sink in my room. She filled a cup with water and brought it to me, then got one for herself. We both drank, the cool water soothing throats raw from crying and talking. Grandma, Sarah said, settling back into her chair. What you've told me tonight, it's one of the bravest things I've ever witnessed. And I work with trauma survivors every single day. I don't feel brave, I said, but the words didn't have the same defeated tone they'd had earlier. Something had shifted inside me. Something had opened up. Bravery isn't the absence of fear, Sarah said. It's doing the hard thing despite the fear. And you've just done the hardest thing imaginable. I nodded slowly, letting her words sink in. Maybe she was right. Maybe after 75 years of being afraid, I'd finally done something brave. What happens now? I asked. I've told you my story. I finally said the words out loud. But what does that change? Uncle Raymond is still dead. The people who should have protected me are still gone. The damage is still done. Sarah leaned forward, her social worker training evident in her thoughtful response. What it changes is you, Grandma. You're no longer carrying this alone. You're no longer letting shame and silence poison you from the inside. You've taken back your voice, your truth, your story. But there's more we can do if you want, she continued. We can report this to the proper authorities, even though Raymond is deceased. It creates a record, a documentation that he was an abuser. If anyone ever investigates him, if any other survivors come forward, there will be a record of your testimony. Would anyone care? I asked. Would anyone listen to an 87-year-old woman talking about something that happened in 1950? Yes, Sarah said firmly. Things are different now, Grandma. We understand trauma better, we believe survivors. And there are organizations dedicated to helping survivors of childhood sexual abuse, no matter how long ago it happened. There are support groups, counselors, advocacy programs. I felt a flutter of something in my chest. Hope maybe, or just the absence of despair, which itself felt like a gift. I've spent my whole life thinking I was alone in this, I said. Thinking I was the only one who couldn't just move on, couldn't just forget. Are you telling me there are other people out there who understand, who carry these same kinds of secrets? Thousands of them, Sarah said gently. Millions, probably. Childhood sexual abuse is far more common than most people want to believe. And many survivors carry that trauma for decades before they're able to speak about it. You're not alone. Grandma, you never were. The tears came again, but this time they felt different. Cleaner somehow. Like they were washing away something that had been rotting inside me for too long. There's something else we could do, Sarah said carefully. If you're comfortable with it, we could tell the family. Your children, your grandchildren. Not as a way to shame anyone or tear the family apart, but as a way to heal. As a way to break the cycle of silence. My immediate instinct was to say no, to protect them from this ugly truth. But then I thought about what I'd told Sarah earlier, About how secrets seep out, how my silence had affected my children even when they didn't know why. Your mama, I said slowly. Linda, she's been worried about me for years. Worried about my nightmares, my anxiety, my episodes as the doctors call them. What if knowing the truth actually helps her understand? Helps her stop blaming herself for not being able to fix whatever's wrong with her mother? Exactly, Sarah said. The truth might be painful, but it's better than the confusion and worry that comes from not understanding. And Grandma, your story might help someone else in the family. Maybe there's another survivor who's been too afraid to speak up. Maybe hearing your courage will give them courage too. I thought about that. The idea that my pain, my story, my breaking of silence could help someone else. It gave meaning to all those years of suffering in a way nothing else had. I want to think about it, I said. About telling the family. It's a big step. Of course, Sarah said. There's no rush. You've already taken the biggest step tonight, telling me. Everything else can happen in whatever time frame feels right for you. I looked at the clock on my wall. It was nearly 10 o'clock. We'd been talking for almost 4 hours. You should go home, I said. Your young man will be wondering where you are. Sarah smiled. Marcus knows I'm here. I texted him a while ago to let him know I'd be late. He understands that sometimes my work or my family needs me. He sounds like a good man. I said, Sarah agreed. Kind of reminds me of what you've told me about Grandpa James. Patient, understanding, solid. Hold on to that, I advised. Good men are rare. When you find one, you keep him. I plan to, Sarah said with a soft smile. Then her expression turned more serious. Grandma, before I go, I want to ask you something. How are you feeling right now? I know this has been incredibly difficult. Are you okay? I took a moment to actually check in with myself. To feel what I was feeling instead of immediately pushing it away. I'm tired, I said honestly. Exhausted, really. But I also feel lighter. Like I've been carrying a 200-pound weight on my back for 75 years and someone just lifted it off. I can breathe deeper. Does that make sense? Perfect sense, Sarah said. That's what speaking your truth does. It releases the pressure that builds up from keeping secrets. I'm also scared, I admitted. Scared that now that I've started talking about it, I won't be able to stop. Scared that the nightmares will get worse before they get better. Scared of what people will think when they find out. Those fears are all valid, Sarah said. And I want you to know that you don't have to go through any of this alone. I'm going to give you some phone numbers before I leave. Crisis lines, counseling services that specialize in trauma, support groups for elderly survivors. You can call them anytime, day or night. And I'm going to come back tomorrow, she continued. And the day after that. As often as you need me. We're going to walk through this together, okay? I felt tears prick my eyes again. Why are you being so good to me? Because you're my grandmother and I love you? Sarah said simply. But also because this is what I do. I help survivors reclaim their lives, their voices, their power. And Grandma, you deserve all of that. You've always deserved it. She stood up and came over to my wheelchair, kneeling down so we were eye to eye. I'm so proud of you. I know I'm young, and maybe it's not my place to say that, but I am. What you did tonight took more courage than most people will ever have to summon in their entire lives. I reached out and touched her face, this beautiful granddaughter who'd given me the gift of being heard. Thank you, I whispered. Thank you for listening. Thank you for believing me. Thank you for helping me find my voice after all these years. Thank you for trusting me with your story, Sarah said. I won't let you down, Grandma, I promise. She helped me get ready for bed. A task I usually hated, feeling helpless and old. But tonight, it felt different. It felt like being cared for rather than being managed. Like someone was tending to me out of love rather than obligation. As I settled into my bed, Sarah pulled the blanket up around me. Do you think you'll be able to sleep tonight? She asked. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe not. But if I don't, at least I'll know why. At least I'm not confused anymore about where all this pain is coming from. If you can't sleep, or if you have nightmares, call the nurse's station, Sarah said. And I'm going to let them know that you might need some extra support tonight. I'll tell them you've had some difficult memories surface, and that you might benefit from someone checking on you more frequently. You don't have to tell them the details, she added quickly, seeing the alarm on my face. Your story is yours to share with whoever you choose. But they should know that you might need extra care tonight. I nodded, grateful for her thoughtfulness. Sarah wrote down several phone numbers on a piece of paper and left it on my bedside table. Then she kissed my forehead, something she hadn't done since she was a little girl. I'll be back tomorrow after work, she said, around 6 o'clock, and Grandma, if you need me before then, you call me. Anytime, I will, I promised. After she left, I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling. The room felt different somehow. The shadows weren't as threatening. The silence wasn't as oppressive. I'd spent 75 years being afraid of my own story. Afraid that speaking it would destroy me, would destroy my family, would confirm that I was everything Uncle Raymond had made me feel like, dirty, shameful, wrong. But I'd spoken it. I'd told Sarah everything, and I was still here, still breathing. Still myself, maybe even more myself than I'd been in 7.5 decades. I thought about James, my dear husband who'd been gone for 22 years. I liked to think he was somewhere, somehow knowing that I'd finally done it. That I'd finally told the whole truth to someone. He would have been proud of me, I thought. He would have held me close and told me I was brave. I thought about my children, Robert, Linda, Thomas. Would they want to know? Would it help them or hurt them to learn what their mother had been carrying all these years? I thought about Uncle Raymond, dead and buried for 47 years. Would he be angry that I'd finally spoken? Or would he have known, somehow, that eventually the truth always comes out? I didn't have answers to any of these questions. But for the first time in my life, I was okay with not having answers. I was okay with just being in this moment. Exhausted, frightened, but somehow also free. Just before I drifted off to sleep, I whispered into the darkness. My name is Dorothy Mae Johnson. I am 87 years old. And 75 years ago, my Uncle Raymond sexually abused me. It was not my fault, I was just a child. And I am not alone. The words hung in the air like a prayer. Like a proclamation. Like the beginning of something new. I did sleep that night. Not perfectly, not dreamlessly, but I slept. And when I woke up the next morning to the sound of LaShonda bringing in my breakfast tray, I felt different. "Morning, Miss Dorothy," LaShonda said cheerfully, setting the tray on my table. "You look better today, more rested." "I feel better," I said and realized I meant it. LaShonda smiled. "That's good to hear. You've been having such a hard time lately. We've all been worried about you." After she left, I ate my oatmeal and drank my coffee, looking out the window at the morning sun. The world looked the same as it had yesterday, same parking lot, same trees, same sky. But I was seeing it with different eyes. The day passed slowly. I went to the morning activity, chair exercises led by a perky young woman who was far too energetic for 8:30 in the morning. I had lunch in the dining room with some of the other residents. I watched the birds at the feeder outside the common room window. Normal, boring, everyday things. But I was present for them in a way I hadn't been in months, maybe years. The constant loop of trauma in my head had quieted. It was still there. I knew it would always be there, but it wasn't screaming at me anymore. Around 3 o'clock, one of the nurses brought me to the phone. "You have a call, Miss Dorothy." It was Linda, my daughter. My heart jumped. Had Sarah told her already? "Hi, Mama," Linda said. "I just wanted to check on you. See how you're doing." "I'm doing okay, baby," I said, and it wasn't entirely a lie. "Sarah told me she came to visit you last night," Linda said. "She said you two had a good long talk. I'm glad. You've seemed so down lately, and Sarah has a way of lifting people's spirits." So Sarah hadn't told her. Not yet. She was leaving that choice to me. "Yes," I said carefully. "We did talk. It was good. Really good. I'm so glad," Linda said. "Listen, Mama, I was thinking maybe I could come by this weekend. We could have lunch together, maybe go sit in the garden if the weather's nice." "I'd like that," I said. And then, before I could stop myself, "Linda, there's something I need to talk to you about. Something important." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Are you okay? Is it your health?" "No, it's not my health," I said. It's about the past. About something that happened a long time ago. Something I should have told you years ago." Another pause, longer this time. "Okay, Mama. We can talk about whatever you need to talk about." "Yes," I said. "This weekend. And Linda, could you ask Robert and Thomas to come too? I think I need to tell all three of you at once." "You're scaring me a little," Linda admitted. "Don't be scared," I said. "It's not bad news. Not really. It's just truth. Old truth that needs to finally come out. All right, Mama. I'll call the boys. We'll all come Saturday afternoon." After we hung up, I sat there holding the phone, my heart pounding. I'd done it. I'd set it in motion. Saturday I would tell my children the truth. Sarah arrived at 6 o'clock, just like she'd promised. She brought more lemon cookies and her warm, steady presence. "How are you feeling today?" she asked, settling into the chair beside me. "Nervous," I admitted. I called Linda. I asked her to bring Robert and Thomas on Saturday. "I'm gonna tell them." Sarah's face lit up. "Grandma, that's wonderful. That's such a big step." "I'm terrified," I confessed. "What if they're angry I didn't tell them sooner? What if it changes how they see me? What if they love you and support you because you're their mother and you've just trusted them with something incredibly painful?" Sarah interrupted gently. "What if this actually brings you closer together? What if this helps them understand you in ways they never could before?" I took a shaky breath. "I keep thinking about your mama. About how she spent years trying to help me, trying to fix whatever was wrong, never understanding why I was so broken. Maybe knowing the truth will finally give her peace." "I think it will," Sarah said. "Not immediately. It will be painful for her to hear. But in the long run, yes. Truth is healing, even when it hurts at first. We talked for a while about practical things, what I would say, how I would say it. Sarah offered to be there if I wanted, but I said no, this was something I needed to do alone with my children. What about after Saturday, I asked. After I tell them. What then? Then you keep healing, Sarah said. Maybe you consider counseling. There are therapists who specialize in working with elderly survivors. Maybe you join a support group. Maybe you write down your story, not just for you, but for other survivors who need to know they're not alone. Write it down, I ask. Your story is powerful, Grandma, Sarah said. Think about how it's already helped me understand trauma better, helped me be a better social worker. Think about how it could help other survivors realize they're not too old, it's not too late. Their voices still matter. I thought about that woman Sarah had mentioned, the one who'd come in after 70 years to report her abuse. I thought about all the other women and men out there, carrying their secrets, thinking they were alone. Maybe, I said. Maybe I could do that, after I tell my children, after I catch my breath a little. There's no rush, Sarah assured me. You get to decide what comes next. You're in control of your story now. In control of my story. What a concept. For 75 years Uncle Raymond had controlled my story. His actions, his threats, his violence had dictated the narrative of my life. Even after his death he'd controlled it through my silence, my shame, my fear. But not anymore. Saturday came too quickly and not quickly enough. I was ready. I'd been ready for 75 years, really, but I was also terrified. My 3 children arrived together at 2 o'clock. Robert at 64, still working as a mechanic, his hands permanently stained with motor oil. Linda at 62, retired from nursing just last year, her hair gone completely gray. And Thomas at 60, the baby of the family, still military, straight in his posture, even though he'd been out of the army for decades. They all looked worried. They'd clearly been talking among themselves, trying to figure out what this was about. We gathered in the small common room that families could reserve for private visits. I'd asked the staff to make sure we wouldn't be interrupted. Mama, what's going on? Robert asked once we were all settled. You're making us nervous. I looked at my 3 children. These people I'd brought into the world, raised, loved with everything I had. They deserved the truth. They'd always deserved it. There's something I need to tell you. I began, my voice surprisingly steady. Something that happened to me a long time ago. Something I should have told you years ago, but I was too afraid. Too ashamed. Too convinced that keeping it secret was the right thing to do. I saw Linda's hand go to her mouth. I think she already knew somehow. A mother's intuition, maybe, or just the pieces finally clicking into place. 75 years ago, when I was 12 years old, I said, I was sexually abused by my Uncle Raymond, your great Uncle Raymond. It happened multiple times that summer. I tried to tell my mother, your grandmother, but she didn't believe me, so I stayed quiet. I buried it, and I've been carrying it ever since. The silence in that room was absolute. Thomas spoke first, his voice rough with emotion. Mama, are you saying? I'm saying your Uncle Raymond molested me when I was a child, I said, forcing the words out clearly. And I never told anyone except your father until this week when I finally told Sarah. Robert's face had gone red. That son of a, he stopped himself. His hands clenched into fists. He's already dead. I can't even. Linda was crying, silent tears streaming down her face. Mama, oh mama, all these years, all the nightmares, the anxiety, the way you'd get so tense at family gatherings. It was because of him. Yes, I said simply. Why didn't you tell us? Thomas asked, and there was hurt in his voice, not anger. We could have helped you, we could have. What could you have done? I asked gently. He was already dead by the time you were adults. And before that, what could children do? I didn't tell you because I was trying to protect you. From the ugliness. From the family drama that would have erupted. From the burden of knowing your mother had been violated. But we knew something was wrong, Linda said, wiping her eyes. We just didn't know what. And it made everything harder, Mama. Not knowing. Trying to help you but not understanding what we were supposed to be helping with. I know that now, I said. Sarah helped me understand that my silence, even when I thought it was protecting you, was actually hurting you. Hurting all of us. So I'm telling you now. I'm breaking the silence. We talked for 3 hours. They asked questions, some I could answer, some I couldn't. They cried. Robert punched the wall and had to apologize to the staff. Thomas sat with his head in his hands, breathing hard. Linda held me while we both sobbed. But through it all there was love. There was support. There was belief. Not once did any of them doubt my story. Not once did they suggest I was confused or mistaken or lying. They believed me. They validated me. They told me they were sorry. Sorry for what had been done to me. Sorry they hadn't known. Sorry they couldn't protect me retroactively. As evening came and they prepared to leave, Linda hugged me tight. Thank you for telling us, Mama. I know how hard that must have been. But thank you for trusting us, for letting us in on you, I told her. I love all of you. And I'm sorry it took me so long, don't apologize, Robert said firmly. You survived, you raised us, you gave us what matters. After they left, I sat alone in my room, exhausted but at peace. I'd done it. I told my children. The secret that had poisoned my life for 75 years was finally out in the open, and I was still here. Still loved, still their mother. In the weeks that followed, things changed. Linda arranged for me to see a therapist who specialized in trauma, a kind woman named Dr. Martinez who didn't bat an eye at my age or the fact that the abuse had happened in 1950. She told me that trauma doesn't have an expiration date, and healing can happen at any stage of life. Sarah connected me with a support group for elderly survivors. Once a month, a group of us, all over 70, all carrying decades-old secrets, would meet in a conference room at the community center. We'd share our stories, cry together, support each other. I'd never felt less alone. The nightmares didn't disappear completely, but they became less frequent, less intense. Now when I woke up, I knew they were just memories. Painful, yes, but not happening now. I was safe, I was believed, I was loved. Robert, Linda, and Thomas became more present in my life. They visited more often, called more frequently. We talked about things we'd never talked about before, not just my trauma, but all kinds of truths that had been buried under years of polite family silence. And I started writing. Just a little at first, notes, memories, fragments of my story. But gradually, it grew into something more. Sarah suggested I write it all down from beginning to end. Other survivors need to hear this, she said. They need to know it's never too late. So I wrote. With my arthritic hands and my old mind that sometimes forgot words, I wrote my story. The whole truth of it. Not to shame anyone, not to seek revenge, but to say this happened. I survived. And you can too. I'm 87 years old now. I don't know how much time I have left on this earth. But however long it is, I'll spend it living in truth rather than silence. I'll spend it with my voice reclaimed, my story told, my burden shared. Uncle Raymond took my childhood. He took my innocence. He took 75 years of peace from me. But he didn't take my life. He didn't take my capacity to love or be loved. He didn't take my strength, even though I didn't know I had any until recently. And he doesn't get to take my voice. Not anymore. My name is Dorothy Mae Johnson. I am a survivor of childhood sexual abuse. I carried that secret for 75 years and it almost killed me. But I'm here now, speaking my truth. And if my story helps even one person find the courage to speak theirs, then maybe, just maybe, all those years of pain will have meant something. To anyone listening who's carrying their own secret, their own trauma, their own shame, you are not alone. It is not your fault. You are not too old and it's not too late. Your voice matters. Your truth matters. You matter. Speak when you're ready. And when you do, know that somewhere, an 87-year-old woman who finally found her voice after 7 decades is listening, believing, and standing with you. You are not alone. None of us are alone anymore.